California Mortgage Bankers Association. Looking back, looking forward.
Hi, I'm Scott Whittle. I'm a director of the California Mortgage Bankers Association, and it's a privilege to be here today. I started in the mortgage industry in the 1970s. I presently help the association in their legislative activities, but today we're here to talk about the origins of our association, and it's a privilege to be here with Roger Olson. Roger is not only a business friend, but he's also a family friend. It's a real privilege to be able to talk with Roger about the origins of our association.
I'm Roger Olson, a longtime mortgage lender. I've retired after 62 years in the business, and I was in on the founding of the California Mortgage Bankers Association and served as the first treasurer, second secretary, third vice president, and fourth president.
Looking back, in the early 1950s, with victorious General Dwight Eisenhower serving as president and the post-war economic boom in its infancy, the mortgage banking and real estate finance industry saw bright days ahead. However, California was still considered the wild, wild west to much of the financial world. And in order to facilitate the surge in demand and economic activity, something had to be done to shake up the established order.
One of the goals was to attract Eastern lenders, and you have to reel back to the 50s. There were so many insurance companies that many of the officers had never been to California. It was very remote.
During that time, California's financial hubs consisted of San Francisco in the north and the Los Angeles metropolitan area in the south. Both regions had active and solid mortgage banking groups, yet something was missing.
And a lot of life companies were small and based in little towns in the Midwest, and they needed some encouragement to come. So they ultimately needed some forum that would attract them so we could tell the California story.
Despite their provincial strength, there was still concern that Midwest and Northeast financial interests did not view the Golden State as a worthwhile real estate market. In 1954, during a small gathering of Western mortgage professionals, Urban Wild, president of the Southern California Mortgage Bankers, and Willis Bryant, president of the Northern California Mortgage Bankers Association, discussed ways to leverage their collective strength and accomplish common goals.
Urban Wild was a very strong leader of the Southern California Mortgage Bankers Association, which had a pretty good membership here. The Northern California MBA was headed by a fellow named Willis Bryant, a fabulous character. He was with American Trust Company, but he and Urban had gotten acquainted partly through MBA of America get-together. There was a feeling that we needed a statewide organization to deal with legislative issues, also educational issues, as evidenced by the School of Mortgage Banking, which was a 2-week session every summer that young mortgage bankers came from all over the West and sometimes the East to attend. So there was that feeling, and also the feeling that combined we might have a better chance of attracting Eastern lenders if we could get our story out.
Thus was born the California Mortgage Bankers Association, or CMBA. Willis and Urban saw 3 goals that the CMBA could help accomplish, in addition to encouraging investment in California's real estate market. Advocacy. As California's population grew, both men knew that the state legislature would begin to cast an eye their way, making it critical that the mortgage and real estate finance industry spoke with one voice before the legislature, governor, and state government departments.
So there was a feel we better get together and watch out for what's coming down the road from the legislature. And that was one of the key things. So we could speak with one voice, north and south.
Education. Both Willis and Urban had a passion for education and had been instrumental in founding the School of Mortgage Banking, held each year at Stanford University. They knew that in order to keep pace with changing times, markets, trends, and more, tomorrow's mortgage banker needed to stay one step ahead. The CMBA would be a leader in providing timely updates, valuable education, and everything the mortgage banker would need.
The fundamentals in many respects are looking out on legislation, but also education. And today we have many programs, the Young Mortgage Bankers Program. And at that time, was it mostly individual companies doing their own training? I know the association did some.
Don't forget the School of Mortgage Banking at Stanford that was founded a couple of years before CMBA was founded, largely by Willis Bryant.
Connection. One of the priorities the founders of CMBA held was that their small fraternity of real estate finance professionals needed each other to encourage a life outside the cramped corridors of their offices. Lifelong friendships were built over dinners, conferences, seminars, and yes, costume parties and luau's.
You'd see him at the luau's falling into the pool and stuff like that, or doing a Hawaiian dance with me in costume and that sort of stuff. So, yeah, these people had to be a combination of business persons and salesmen.
Urban and Willis and the founders of the California Mortgage Bankers Association succeeded in establishing the premier state mortgage banking association and helped transform California from a wild, unknown land into the thriving, booming market leader it still is today. Challenges and opportunities. One of the early and most pressing needs was to convince Midwest and Northeast money to consider investing in the state. Although one of the most ambitious commercial real estate projects, Disneyland, was underway in Anaheim, the state's real estate leaders needed a surefire way to entice investors to give California a chance.
We have to remember California was a capital-hungry state, particularly at that time, into this day, but we needed money. Everything was expanding, the housing boom after the war. We had to bring in capital, and that was one way, is get these insurance companies. So if you're gonna have a convention to attract Midwesterners, you put it right at the end of the worst time of their winter, when they can justify going out, enjoy it, and of course play golf. So it was a big part of it was picking a place that was sunny and pleasant and warm, even in March.
They decided to take one of the businessmen's universal passions, golf, and combine it with California's legendary weather and beauty. Despite their surroundings, the founders of CMBA were still unsure if their efforts to attract investors would pay off.
And they just were so anxious to see someone other than the people they knew coming. And they looked particularly for people in, well, three-piece suits that and a coat. That was from the Midwest or back east. And if they looked for someone with just a coat and a jacket, that was probably San Francisco. And then someone shows up in a tropical shirt, that was LA. You know, so there was a lot of iffiness about whether we could pull this off.
The plan worked, and the event was a success. That opened the door and signaled to the rest of the country that California was ready to take off. As the market grew and California became one of the nation's top real estate markets, both commercial and residential, those who had grown up in the industry began to see changes within it that would reshape both the market and the market players.
We've been reflecting on what I call the golden years of mortgage banking, which were those early years, maybe the early decades, but it got more and more serious. The issues became more serious.
The industry also witnessed a landmark law passed to spare the state's homeowners from increasingly dangerous taxes.
It was a growing concern because California values were rising rapidly. And for the politicians, it was wonderful because every 5 years they'd come around and reassess your home, and they apply the same current tax rate to your house, and you were in a state where it was going up and up and up. If it was sitting in Nebraska, it wouldn't matter much because the values didn't change. But Howard Jarvis and another fellow came up with the idea of limiting the taxability of your house to the current amount, it could only go up 1% a year. And it really saved so many people, especially elderly people. They would have been out.
One of the biggest challenges the California Mortgage Bankers Association and its members would ever face was the battle over usury during the late 1970s, culminating in a decisive victory for mortgage bankers and ensuring the continued viability of the industry in California.
Rising interest rates and usury, which I think is a big story our association has to tell of that history.
Major. This was the end of the line for mortgage bankers if we hadn't been able to act. And it was a nasty 5-year battle. The usury limit had been passed 20 years or so. And at the time, interest rates were relatively low, so no one really got agitated too much about a 10% maximum interest that anyone could charge. Anyone except the banks and the savings loans who were exempt. So it only affected mortgage bankers, savings and loans, which were not that important at the time, and insurance companies. And we challenged the law on constitutional basis. And so we mounted a lawsuit and we won it. We won it. So it was a wonder we beat them. And we got reversed on appeal, but we had scared the bank. They saw we were willing to go on to the U.S. Supreme Court because it was a constitutional issue, as Scott, as an attorney, you could appreciate.
And then it was later solidified with the Proposition 2.
So CMBA mounted another ballot campaign, Proposition 2, and the banks retired to the sidelines. They didn't help us, they didn't oppose us, and we won. And it was so lucky because it would have been the end of mortgage banking in California, the total end, because rates ultimately got to 16% for the kind of business we did. I mean, it was just...
I remember when, after a year or two in business in the late 70s, our loan department at the Sutro Co., they were sitting around wondering what to do. They couldn't make a loan.
It was very difficult till finally Prop 2 went through. So it was a great triumph, maybe the key triumph of CMBA.
Well, it was a significant seminal event really for mortgage banking, because thereafter, and people might say, well, the agencies, of course, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, who were in existence at that time, well, they could buy the loans. Well, they indeed could buy the loans, but the interest rate wasn't satisfactory to them, so it was a moot point.
Across the board.
Across the board.
While the legislative and electoral battles would consume much of the association's might, they never lost sight of Urban and Willis's commitment to education, a commitment that has continued to this day. In addition to providing informative speakers year after year, the group has always remained focused on educating the next generation of mortgage bankers. From the early days of the School of Mortgage Banking, to the care and feeding of the young mortgage banker, to today's Future Leaders program. Personalities. As colleagues and friends, the members of the California Mortgage Bankers Association and their families found the gatherings, conventions, and meetings to be more than just work. It gave them a chance to form lifelong bonds that would weather recessions, job changes, and mergers, and rejoice in collective victories, family additions, and more.
This is going to be a good old boys convention or a get-together. They included the wives, and that became a tradition for CMBA. And the wives went a long way to cementing these friendships that transcended the business aspect. There were lifelong friendships formed.
Looking forward, after 60 years of serving California's real estate finance market, the CMBA, now known as the California MBA, is stronger than ever, yet remains true to its founders' values. At the core of our mission are the same principles that guided Urban Wild and Willis Bryant long ago: advocacy, education, and connection. For more information or to join, go to www.cmba.com.